Okay, I think I got the signal from Greg that we are live streaming, and it is 6:01, so I think we'll just ask everyone to join us and stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, as I've shared in the past few meetings, this is our marathon meeting evening, and we will begin with the budget hearing. And I believe Julie Holmen will lead us through that.
Hi, good evening. It sounds funny when I introduce myself, but this is a public budget hearing. So I'm Julie Holmen. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations for the School District of Holmen. And welcome. Annually at the budget hearing, this is a required hearing based on state of Wisconsin statutes. And so we're here every year this time in October. I will be giving an overview of the School District of Holmen budget process, the school district tax rate and tax levy, and the original budget notable changes since the proposed budget was presented and approved in August and September. So we'll begin with budget overview and perspectives. The budget development is a continuous process. There's 5-year forecasting is revised every winter. We began more specific work on the 2021 budget development in July of 2019 with the board approval of the budget development calendar. In November of 2019, the leadership team submitted unmet needs for funding consideration for the 2021 budget. In January, the board approved a preliminary input variables to be used in revised forecasting. The board examined a preliminary budget in June of 2020, followed by a proposed budget approved in September. This evening, the original budget for 2021 will be presented for approval in addition to the tax levy certification. There are many external and internal variables when it comes to budgeting. We'll just review some of each before I get into more details. Externally, I want to mention some of the greatest impacts on our budget. Now, the pandemic's not on this slide, but it has both external and internal impacts. The revenue limit per member increased over last year, $179 per member. The per pupil categorical aid remains at $742 per member, the same as prior year. The open enrollment regular education transfer increased from $7,771 to an estimated $8,125 over last year. And the special education open enrollment transfer increased from $12,723 to an estimated $12,977. What that means is every time we have a student that open enrolls into the School District of Holmen that is a non-resident or out of that is a resident, the aid is transferred in those dollar amounts whether they are regular or special education students. Participation in the private school voucher program has an increased impact on Holmen. There is also an increase in the special needs scholarship voucher program for private school students. I will share that impact further later in the presentation. The pandemic response budget is highly unpredictable for 2021 and our greatest variable. Currently, there is an additional $209,000 in CARES Act federal funding, also called ESSER funding in the state of Wisconsin, and that is budgeted in both revenue and expense. In addition, there's another $1.2 million added in general fund expenditures for additional staffing, technology, PPE, disinfectant supplies, and equipment. I don't know if that's enough money. It is an estimate, it is a budget, and that was presented to you in August as well in the proposed budget. So that is something that we continue to monitor. The third Friday enrollment in seats on September 18th of 2020 was 3,861. That is down from 3,914 a year ago. The 2020-21 enrollment decrease of 53 students per the third Friday count over prior year impacts the decline of the 3-year current average membership. That decline is from 4,092 in membership to 4,074, or minus 18. I will talk more about enrollment and membership in the enrollment presentation this evening as well. This average is used to compute the maximum revenue limit prior to exemptions. One of the largest impacts on the budget are the wages and benefits for our staff. This not only includes salaries, but also the health insurance premiums and health savings account employer contributions. The Consumer Price Index urban rate on July 1st, 2020 was 1.81%. This rate was approved and applied to base wages for the 2020-21 school year. The school district's healthcare plan premium renewal was increased 4.9%, another impact on expenditures. We continue to maintain our list of un- and underfunded needs. As a district, we are doing our best to develop strategies to meet as many of these needs as we can. The 2018 referendum for the high school addition and remodel has enabled the district to meet many of these high school needs on previous underfunded needs lists. In addition, there has been nearly $100,000 added into this original budget based on prior year unspent carryover dollars. These are very specific requests to provide furniture, high school ELA literature set, and instructional textbook purchasing cycle. So these are in relation to things that were not able to be purchased because of our closure in the spring, and they want to continue to provide those things at those buildings, and so up to 5% was approved for carryover based on those specifics. Next, I am going to talk about budget detail and tax levy. In this section, we'll review the 2021 school property tax and the tax comparison with last year. I will talk about the tax levy amount, the revenue limit impact, state equalized aid impact, tax base growth, historical trend, and the combined impact of levy and tax base. We'll talk about the annual meeting approval of the tax levy and the notable budget report changes from 2019-20 to 2020-21. The recommended school mill rate for the 2021 tax levy certification is $9.77. This means $9.77 per each 1,000 of fair market property value. This represents only the school portion of your property tax bill. The municipal, county, and state changes also need to be considered. This rate is calculated on fair market value, not the assessed value, which is determined by the municipality. The example on the slide gives 3 different fair market property value examples and the school property tax amount. You would identify your fair market property value for your property on your tax bill and then multiply it by the mill rate. To get the mill rate, you move the decimal 3 places to the left, which results in a 0.00977 rate. Multiply that by your fair market property value to get your tax amount. The Board of Education's long practice maintaining a steady rate for the municipalities that contribute to the Holmen School District tax levy. The district strives to maintain a levy sufficient to sustain the operational, capital, and facility costs of the district while practicing debt defeasance strategies to retain budget and cash flow flexibility. The school tax rate change between 1920 and 2021 will be minus 57 cents. This is a decrease. This is the largest decrease we've seen in many years, so this is good. This is good news. We'll talk about why. This slide demonstrates both the 1920 and the 2021 school property tax amounts on the same values, 100,000, 150,000, and 200,000 values. And you can see on the far right column, decrease in the school property tax per each of those fair market properties. This graph shows the School District of Holmen's tax rate 5-year history. This has been updated through 1920 if the proposed recommended tax levy certification is approved this evening. You can add $9.77 all the way to the right of the graph, and it further declines from the previous 5-year rates. This slide shows key financial figures used in the calculation of the aid and levy. How did the district arrive at the tax levy amount? I'm going to step you through that calculation. In line 1 is our student membership FTE used in the calculation, the current 3-year average. I spoke of this earlier. So you can see in line 1, last year the current 3-year average was 4,092. This year it's 4,078, or minus 18 full-time equivalent student membership. Line 2 is the equalized property valuation increase. Property went up 5.34%. Last year at this time, the property had increased 8.54%. 5.34 is still pretty good. It's higher than what is generally expected. For example, when we were refunding our bonds recently, the financial advisors conservatively used about 2% in equalized property valuation growth. So using that as a reference, 5.34% is still decent growth in this environment, in this economy. Line 3 is the allowable revenue limit per member change for 2021. As mentioned earlier, it increased $179. Bringing the max revenue limit per member to $10,618.60. The calculation then, 3-year average membership of 4,074 times the revenue per member, the limit, no exceptions, is on line 3 at $43,260,176. So even though the average 3-year membership declined by 18 because of the increase per member, the actual revenue limit, no exemptions, is a little higher than the prior year. Line 4 demonstrates the revenue limit with exemptions totaling $45,176,027 for 2021. This differs from line 3 because it includes all exemptions. Exemptions that are included are the new recurring referenda for the high school addition at $460,000. So 2 years ago, the voters graciously approved both a referendum to bond $23.5 million for an addition and remodel, and $460,000 in recurring operational dollars on the levy, which starts this fall. In addition, exemptions include non-recurring referendum for the technology that is $450,000 a year for 5 years, and this is year 2. We also have a declining enrollment exemption of $191,000. Private school voucher exemption, $676,646 for regular education, and $138,070 for private school vouchers for students with disabilities. So to recap, there's a decrease in the 3-year average membership of 18, an increase in the equalized property valuation, an increase in the revenue limit per member of $179, and an increase to the private school voucher aid deduction. On line 4, the limit with all exemptions is $1.5 million more than the prior year, primarily due to the new high school recurring referendum, declining enrollment exemption, and the increase in private school vouchers. That combined increase in private school vouchers over prior year is $341,000.
Julie, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So the increased property value, does that include the TIF district values? Are you going to look at that later?
It does not. It's TIF out. You take out that. I was going to give you the total,
Sure.
which I have somewhere.
Before the 5.3, the property value in Holmen actually increase exceeded, or in the district exceeded that 5.3, but because of the TIF coming out, that's what it's at. Okay.
Yes, so the increase I'm referring to is just over prior year, all TID out, or TIF out, it's the same. Tax Incremental Financing District.
Yeah.
Department of Revenue uses both TID out and TIF out when it's talking about that. And that is, the tax is always calculated TIF out.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
So the revenue available under the revenue limit is a combination of the total aid and the general fund levy. On line 5, I show the total aid. There's an increase in total aid of $1.2 million to $30,590,253. The factors that include increase in aid this year specifically is an increase in total shared cost for the equalization aid calculation. The shared cost for equalized aid in 1920 was $45,219,000. For 2021, it's $48,378,000. This is based on prior year spending. The 1920 expenditures related to general fund project costs and debt service refunding of the 2009B series last April has largely contributed to this increase in shared cost for equalized aid in 2021. So what does that mean? We refunded the 2009 series debt in April, which was primarily Prairie View Elementary building construction. Because we refunded it, we had to show that as paid off debt. That's an expense. That expense goes into the shared cost for equalized aid in the general fund. So that helped to increase our aid for 2021 because we refunded debt in 1920. Line 6 is subtracting the total aid from the revenue limit. We obtain the limited revenue allowable to be levied in Fund 10 at $14,585,774. We cannot levy any more than that amount in the general fund. So it's the total revenue limit minus the aid equals our allowable Fund 10 levy. This represents levying the maximum allowable at $14,585,774 for the general fund. Lines 10 and 11 is the revenue from other levies. The debt service recommended levy is $4,868,774, and the community service fund, Fund 80 levy, is recommended at $80,000. The recommended debt levy includes both the principal and interest due on the bonds according to the repayment schedule plus debt defeasance. Our referendum approved debt is not bound by the revenue limit formula. Typically, the district would levy the amount necessary to meet or exceed the current debt service obligation. Line 12 is the recommended total levy, all funds, dollar amount, and it's projected to decrease by $85,000 over last year. And then lines 13 and 14 repeats for you the calculation of the school tax rate and the rate per thousand at $9.77, or a decrease of 57 cents. Of course, individual property owners will be impacted differently depending on their personal fair market property value. The total recommended tax levy is projected to decrease from $19,620,532 to $19,534,548. The school board will take action on the recommended 2020 tax levy later this evening at the regular board meeting. The final tax levy will be certified to the municipalities the first week of November. Just as with the tax rate, putting the tax levy into perspective requires looking at more than 1 year. This screenshot is part of the budget publication that was recently published in the La Crosse Tribune. Part of the required publication, the DPI requires this publication to include the proposed tax levy. And so you can see the 2018-19, 2019-20, and the 2020-21 levies and the percentage change year on year. So last year, the proposed levy was 6.27% increase over prior year, and this year we're proposing a 0.44% decrease over prior year. The tax rate is determined by dividing the total tax levy by the total equalized property value, TID out. The 2019 TID out tax apportionment equalized valuation, which is the fall 2020 property values, is $1,999,167,034. This is an increase over prior year of 5.34%. This results in the tax rate of 0.0097734 and a mill rate of $9.77 per thousand. It is a mill rate decrease of 5.8%. This is an example of the action that is on the board agenda later this evening at the regular board meeting. The recommendation is to set the Fund 10 tax levy at $14,585,774. The debt service Fund 39 levy at $4,868,774, and the Fund 80 tax levy at $80,000. I will talk more about the debt service and the Fund 80 levies in the budget presentation in the next few slides. Before I move on to notable budget changes, are there any questions on mill rate and tax levy?
And maybe I should clarify for everyone that this is a budget hearing of the electorate of the School District of Holmen. So anyone is available at this point in time to ask a question if they have a question about what Julie's presented so far. It's not just the board. It's more of an open meeting. So if anyone has any questions. Otherwise, Julie, go ahead and move on.
Next, I'm going to talk about notable budget changes. This is the original budget that's adopted in October, and there are several variables that the board is familiar with that come between September 18th, third Friday count, and this time, including the equalized property valuation, October 1st, and the equalized aid on October 15th. So those things have all been updated to be included in the original budget. If you are here and you picked up the white copy of the budget, I'll be referring to both the white document and the blue document that are on the back table and also in your board packet or envelope this evening. The first notable change I'd like to share is in fund balance. On page 1, line 8, the 2021 total ending fund balance in the last column is $16,379,426. The last column is the budget column for 2021. If you look one column to the left, you'll see the ending fund balance for 2019-20 or June 30th of 2020 at $16,404,388. This is still considered unaudited until we have the final financial statements from the auditor. I do not anticipate the numbers in the second column to change, but I cannot list them as audited until the board has taken action on the financial statements. The total ending fund balance in 2021 is budgeted to be about $25,000 less than the June 30th, 2020 amount. This change in fund balance from one year to the next is determined by the amount of revenue and expenses during the year. See how the total ending fund balance in one year becomes the beginning fund balance in the next. The beginning fund balance is then increased or decreased by revenue and expenses throughout the fiscal year. In this case, the proposed original budget has a decrease in fund balance because expenditures exceed revenue for the fiscal year. This just provides a close-up shot of the estimated deficit spending in this fiscal year. $25,000 is just 0.04% of the general fund budget, with the ending estimated fund balance for next June at right around $16,379,000. This operational deficit in the general fund at 0.04%. In prior year, the surplus was estimated and even more realized due to the closing of schools. So if you recall, last year, we were anticipating a generous surplus budget, and when we had to close early, the ending result was even more than what we were already had approved as a surplus budget. That will be covered in more detail during the treasurer's report this evening. There are many variables to a school budget. In 2021, the most uncertain is the pandemic-related costs, as mentioned earlier, and we will keep the board and community informed as we go through this fiscal year. Referring now on the 5-page white budget summary handout to lines 11 through 17, this slide shows a decrease in local revenue sources for general operations. Line 11 shows the general fund revenue from property, mobile home, or other tax. That line happens to be an increase, where the rest of them are all lower than prior year. The estimated decrease is primarily in local interest on investments. If you recall, we had several years where we were carrying fund balance specific for the safety and security referendum projects in the general fund. And so we had more dollars that were available and invested than we will have this current year, and the rates are obviously much lower due to the economy. We also have local source of revenue estimated at a pretty significant decrease as well. That would be line 16. So the total, subtotal for local sources for 2021 is $15,396,000. Also on page 1, lines 18 to 22 are revenues from other school districts in Wisconsin. On line 19 is payment for other services. This revenue is estimated to increase. Increases due to enrollment incoming per pupil aid transfer. We did experience an increase in our open enrollment in. We also experienced an increase in our open enrollment out. We're talking about revenue, and therefore this is an aid transfer into the school district of Holmen and a small estimated increase over prior year. As mentioned earlier, the open enrollment transfer for regular education students is estimated at $8,125. For pupils with disabilities, it is estimated at $12,977. For a total, subtotal on line 22 of other school district revenues from within Wisconsin at $1,696,679. Next, lines 32 to 39 are state sources of revenue. Line 32 is state aid categorical. This line includes transportation aid and common school fund aid. Line 33 represents the general state aid. The general state aid for 2021 is $30,707,000, up about $1.45 million over 1920. The per pupil categorical aid is estimated at $3,022,000, and it is part of line 38, source 690. Other state revenue through local units. The per pupil amount remained the same as 1920 at $742 per pupil categorical aid. The amount is multiplied by the 3-year current average of 4,074 members, and therefore the total is slightly less than last year because the 3-year membership was greater last year. The subtotal state sources of revenue in the general fund are $34,214,128 for 2020-21. This is an increase of $1.1 million or 3.4%. Next is the federal sources of revenue. Begins on line 40. The total revenue is estimated at $490,488. Line 42, source 730, includes the $209,000 in CARES Act federal funding in response to the pandemic. And line 43, source 750, includes Title I award. As mentioned in the previous budget, the proposed budget in August, this federal award was reduced by about 50% over the prior year award. The reduction is based on a decrease in local poverty, a 2-year in arrears measure that impacts the 2020 allocation. So a measure from 2018 on local poverty decreases our 2020 Title I award. A decrease in poverty is wonderful news. Unfortunately, a decrease also means that we need to figure out within our other sources of revenue how to continue our important interventions in Title I. You can see on that line 43 going from 236,000 to 134,000, the estimated Title I for 2020-21. The original budget includes the current federal awards, most without the carryover. We are expecting some carryover. Those aren't always available on WISE grants, on DPI, on when this presentation is being completed. So they're usually added in at revised budget time. So on line 58 is the total revenue and other sources for the general fund. And that is estimated at $51,440,554, an increase of 2.1% over prior year. Next, I will move on to the general fund expenditures beginning on line 59 for the top of page 2. Line 66 includes the subtotal of instruction amount of $22,741,000. Lines 60 and 61, undifferentiated curriculum and regular curriculum, primarily make up the majority of the instructional budget. Some of the things that can impact the instructional expenditures, especially this year, is the additional staffing needed to staff the Cooley Region Virtual Academy for the School District of Holmen students. So there are several dollars out of the 1.2 million pandemic budget, I will call it, that is set aside specifically to support the additional staffing, either those teaching CRVA or those that were hired to replace the classroom in-person and virtual learning teachers because that teacher may have gone to teach CRVA. So we had additional costs there. Other things that can impact instructional expenditures include staff attrition, retiree severance, staff benefit election changes, employer premium changes, and the fluctuation of annual substitute costs. So annual substitute costs are obviously also quite a variable this year. We don't know how much they're going to cost or how many will be available. So that is something that is built into the budget, but please know that it is quite a variable for 2021. Line 76 is the total support services budget amount at $18,250,622. $18.2 million represents 35% of the general fund budget. Over the prior 3 years, the district completed a majority of the projects associated with the 2 non-recurring approved referenda from 2017. The 2020-21 budget includes the outstanding contract to complete the Viking 2-stage entry. This project is nearly completed. That cost is included with line 71, which is business administration, facilities, custodial, that all goes into that $250,000 function business administration. So the Viking completion, our outstanding contract with Olympic Builders is also included in that line item. And this is the final of 5 entry projects, so we're excited to be closing out on those projects. The 2021 budget for support services also includes the CARES Act expenditures of $209,000 and the additional COVID response budget in the areas of custodial maintenance, technology, and pupil services. Line 73 represents our insurance and judgments. It's slightly higher over prior year due to an increase in property values and several new buses in our fleet. Overall, the renewal on the lines of risk insurance were favorable for 2021. Line 77 is the financial support necessary to fund the district's special needs programs. The transfer to Fund 27, special education, is projected to increase from 2019-20. Last year, we had lower than anticipated transfer, primarily due to reduction in the special education tuition bills. So some of those were highly reduced after we closed in March, and so that was some savings in Fund 27 and a lower transfer last year over prior year and over what we predict for 2021. Line 78 includes instructional payments to other districts for open enrollment. This includes both the regular and special education tuition expenses for students open enrolled to other districts. It also includes private school vouchers. So a couple minutes ago, I talked about the revenue coming into the district for non-residents that open enroll into Holmen as revenue, and this represents the aid transfer for aid going out of the district to other public and private schools for those that are residents of Holmen attending other locations. Open enrollment out increased from 437 students to 462 students. Open enrollment in increased from 206 students to 238 students. That is a net decrease over prior year of 7 students. The subtotal of non-program transactions on line 80 is $10,508,524. This is an increase of over 6%. The 2020-21 general fund expenditure budget is $51,465,516. This large year-on-year increase is primarily due to the combination of underspending last year, and so we had a budget surplus last year, and the additional pandemic response budget being added this year of $1.4 million. Next is the special project funds. We call it Fund 21 or gift account. This fund accounts for gifts and donations. This budget varies depending on annual gifts received and expended. The funds do carry over for each purpose or individual group. We have over 150 individual budget carryover items or groups or programs within the gift account. This is everything from additional co-curricular fundraising to just other activities that the students are doing, groups and clubs that they raise money for. And then at the lower levels, they raise money by classes, they raise money for field trips, all sorts of things that go through the gift account. The 2021 revenue budget is $880,000. With our current environment, gifts and donations are very uncertain. A budget is entered with the expectation that gift revenue will be carried over. So if I didn't put anything in the revenue budget and we spent it all, then we would have a zero fund balance, and that never really happens. We always seem to carry quite a bit over in our gift accounts. The 2021 expenditure budget is $883,487. This represents those carryover balances from prior year. This year, Fund 21 also includes transfers of balances from Funds 64 and 72. Fund 64 is the previous high school activity account, and Fund 72 is the previous scholarship fund. We are required to close these funds under GASB 84 compliance and account for them going forward in Fund 21. Next is Fund 27, Special Education. The total revenue and expenditure budget for 2021 is $9,325,404. This fund cannot go into a deficit position at fiscal year end. Therefore, the revenue and expense budgets are the same. An interfund transfer is made at fiscal year end to balance the fund to zero. This transfer is from the General Fund 10 and is estimated at $6.1 million on line 94. This transfer was also mentioned previously during the general fund expenditure review on line 77. The summary revenue by source and expenditure by function for special education fund are displayed and in the handout. Next is the debt service fund, or Fund 39. This includes voter-approved debt and is accounted for in this fund. The debt service levy is proposed at $4,868,774. There's also interest included in, minor interest included in line 165, which is why the total revenue is slightly above the levy proposed. Lines 166 and 172 reflect the 2021 expenditure budget for the scheduled principal and interest payments on our long-term bonds. The principal and interest debt obligations for 2021 are $4,393,911.11. This obligation will be met through the debt levy revenue and debt service fund balance from previous debt defeasance. Debt defeasance will continue to be applied to maintain debt service fund balance and flexibility. I'd like to draw your attention to the middle column of numbers, and this was mentioned earlier. You see that the 1920 debt expenditure was $17.3 million. This represents both the P&I due according to the debt schedules and the refunding of the 2009B debt series. The refunding is recorded as an expenditure to pay off the old debt while replacing it with the new debt schedule. This refunding both decreased the interest and term of the old bonds, the old outstanding debt, and it increased the shared cost, positively impacting general fund equalized aid in 2021. The district's outstanding voter-approved indebtedness, the bottom right-hand corner, next June 30th is $25,560,000. So that's the outstanding indebtedness at the end of this fiscal year. This chart demonstrates the Debt 39 bond series from 2019 to 2030. The light blue is the debt that was refunded last April, and it's been replaced with the green, which is the series 2020 refunded debt. The maroon is the 2019 high school addition and remodel debt for $23.5 million, and that is an 11-year payoff schedule, which will be paid off by 2030. Next is Fund 42, the Capital Projects Fund. This fund is used to record revenue and expenditures during the construction process for projects funded through building bonds. In April 2019, the school district bonded for $23.5 million for the voter-approved high school addition and remodel. These projects are estimated to span from September of 2019 into the beginning of 2021. Most of the remodel portion is budgeted in this current fiscal year. The revenue is estimated in Fund 42 at $240,000, and the expenditures are estimated at $8.2 million. Notice there is not a fund balance on line 176. Any fund balance here on June 30th, if there is any left, it's required that we transfer that to Fund 39, which was the previous fund, debt service, and apply it to principal and interest on the bond schedule. Next is the school nutrition program. This is accounted for in Fund 50. The school nutrition program estimated revenue for 2021 is $2,689,000. Estimated budget, expenditure budget is $2,958,000. Both the revenue and the expense for this budget are extremely unpredictable during this pandemic. As you know, school nutrition has worked tirelessly to provide meals to our students. The USDA has recently extended free meals for students through June 30th of 2021. They've also added additional flexibility to school nutrition. Currently, the expenditure budget exceeds the revenue by about $268,000, decreasing the fund balance for June 30th of 2021. This expansion of free meals and more revenue coming from the federal aid will help impact the budgeted revenue and positively impact fund balance, most likely. We assume it will. So. Next is Fund 80, Community Service Fund. In 1920, we began to use Fund 80 again. in order to identify district program support for the new Holmen area Boys and Girls Club. There's $5,200 in carryover from the liaison contract, which is being extended into 2021. The source of funding in community service for 2021 is the tax levy and the carryover from prior year. The recommendation is to levy $80,000 rather than the previously proposed $100,000. The reduction is due to the delay in in-person school and the delay to after-school programming opening at the BGC because of the pandemic. The Fund 80 will support a full-time position, a liaison position for parents, school, and the Boys and Girls Club, identifying or developing educational programming for homework support, tutoring, and play-based educational activities. In addition, there's some identified for a part-time tutor, after-school tutoring at the Boys and Girls Club, and then about $5,000 in program supplies. So one of the things to note with Fund 80 is that community service is available to all resident students, not just the students attending the School District of Holmen. So all resident students would have access to these services, these academic supports at the Boys and Girls Club. Are there any questions on the budget review? Any questions? Thank you.
I would just note too that the tax levy, I think there is, on the new business in the annual meeting is also included there as well as the regular meeting of the board, so.
Yes.
Okay. Well, as I mentioned earlier, then I think we're ready to move to the annual meeting. Dr. Mueller, yeah?
Yep, sure.
So as I mentioned before, this is a meeting of the electorate of the residents of the Holmen School District. So you are all eligible to serve in a role if you would like. But I will, as current president of the school board, I will call the annual meeting to order and welcome you to the annual meeting. It's not often that we have as many people here in person, and I know we have a few folks watching virtually, so welcome to the annual meeting. The first item of business is the election of an annual meeting chairperson. See, like I said, even you could be the chairperson, but if you are interested, please let it be known. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to appoint someone as the chair of the annual meeting for this evening.
Move to appoint Cheryl Hancock.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion made and seconded to appoint Cheryl Hancock as the chair of the annual meeting. And again, this is where you all get to vote, and hopefully you've signed in to the sign-in thing. Residents have signed in. So all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? Motion carries. Okay. The next item, and this is very similar to what Julie said, it is statutorily required that we hold this meeting, and the items that are on the agenda are again statutorily required. But the next item is adopting Robert's Rules of Order as our guide for the annual meeting. So I would entertain a motion to adopt Robert's Rules of Order for the annual meeting.
So moved.
Gary, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Brian, motion's been made and seconded to adopt Robert's Rules of Order to guide us for the annual meeting. All of those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The next item is the election of the annual meeting parliamentarian. I would note that in previous years, Gary has served in that role. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to elect a parliamentarian for the annual meeting.
I make a motion for Gary Dunlap to be the parliamentarian.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to elect Gary Dunlap as the parliamentarian for the annual meeting.
Sounds like a
All
railroad to
those,
me.
all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item is the approval of the agenda. I would note that the agenda has been posted, distributed, and sent to the local media. With this in mind, are there any changes to this agenda? And keep in mind, this is just the agenda for the annual meeting. So is there a motion to approve the annual meeting agenda as published? Chris? And I think Barb seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the agenda as published, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item is approval of minutes. I would note that the minutes are included in pages 36 and 37 of the annual report booklet. And I don't know if everyone has that. Is that in the back or?
Yeah, there's some here, and also it is on our district website under Board of Education. They can find the annual report.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to approve tonight's, the minutes from the October 28th, 2019 annual meeting as published.
So moved.
Brian, is there a second? Chris, motion's been made and seconded to approve the minutes from October 28th, 2019. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is public participation, and this is related to public participation for the annual meeting business. So I don't have any cards for this evening, so we will then move on to reports, which Dr. Mueller.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to get this up here. Oh, boy. Uh-oh. I'm going to be able to show the people in my report. Oh, well, here, we'll go this route. Sorry. Okay, we want to make sure our people at home are able to see them also, so we'll go this route this evening.
Okay, Barb, can you see this?
Can you see the screen? Oops. All right,
She shook her
excellent.
head- She shook her head no.
I thought I saw a thumbs up.
Oh, can you see it now, Barb? The shared screen?
Well, it's just,
I saw it for a second, and now I just see Dr. Mueller.
Greg, we'll get you going. There we
There
go.
we go.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you,
you.
Barb.
Okay, good evening. So tonight, this is the annual report, and the annual report is reflective of our past year in the school district of Holmen. First, I want to start with, back actually in January of 2020, which seems like a long time ago right now, but back then, we were working with our community and other stakeholder groups on strategic planning, and we had a strategic planning session gaining community input about how to move forward within our district, what was important to them and what they envisioned in 5 years from now. And then also from there, we also gathered with staff and got input from students and came up with a new vision statement, which is before us here tonight, which really defines our aspirations for success, and that is to belong, serve, and succeed. Also, out of that input, we did revise our mission, which is really our purpose of what we do every day in the school district of Holmen, and that is preparing students for tomorrow through an engaging and inclusive educational community today. And lastly, part of that strategic planning session was around our core values, which is really this is what guides us in who we are and what are about our daily actions. And the words that define our core values is empowerment, equity, excellence, integrity, and safety. So all that work happened this past year to help guide us in moving forward with our decision making. So, we've had many referendums in the past year, so this is the evening that we go back and review and talk about, actually, we have a lot to celebrate and a lot of successes that have occurred in the past year. Bring you back to April 4th of 2017 is when we passed the referendum for improvements of safety and security in the school district of Holmen. Well, before you tonight, we are coming to completion of this project. As you can see, we had digital door access and controls that were done in security cameras. And then this year, we did the completion of, so now every single school within our district has a secure two-stage entrance. Viking was the project that we were finishing up. It was our last one, and that is coming to completion right now. So the 2017 referendum now has come to completion. So safety and security, we thank the community, and that has, the one other part of that is we have $705,000 that's been placed in a restricted fund balance for when we do decide to do an expansion of our Briggs Road or a road out the north end of our high school or east side. So that is still there and available. Here, just the outcome of our Viking Elementary two-stage. Here in the top picture is where the actual old office space was across the hallway, which is now a classroom, a new classroom. And this was part of the entrance across the hallway into the office, which is a flexible learning space where they can have small groups of kids and reading and also display artwork and so on. And this is just a picture of some of their new cubbies areas and another small instructional area that they can do learning with our students. And then here is the outcome of the new two-stage entrance. As you can see, it has a V shape here, kind of as a Viking head for our Viking Elementary School, a new look. And this is a newly constructed addition to Viking. They did a lot of work on the outside too, with replacement of the cement, and the completion of the landscaping will occur here as spring comes around too. And then here's a picture of the inside with all the new cabinetry. And as you can see, some of our safety precautions, some plexiglass, as part of our two-stage entrance to Viking. Okay. Then, on to the next referendum. So, back in November of 2018, the referendum was passed for $23.5 million for an addition and remodel of the high school. And as Julie mentioned, this year we started, we had operational dollars available for maintaining and operating the building. So here, this is an extensive list of the many areas of the high school that were part of this addition and remodel. The new addition is completed with a few minor touch-ups having to be done. It consists of at least over 71,000 new square feet within the high school. Also, phase 2 of the project, which consists of our remodel, is nearing its completion. So we'll go into some details here. So here is a visual of our new entrance to the Fine Arts Center, and this is a view from our new parking lot on the north side of the building of the high school. This Fine Arts Center will now seat approximately 750 people, which is at least 300 more than our old Fine Arts Center. This is an aerial view of this is the other new entrance to the high school. This sits on the southeast corner of the high school. To the right of the entrance, this is an athletic training room. So now, if we were to need to have access from our athletic fields, we have a door also that can be used for emergency situations. And then this is our new multi-purpose gym addition from the outside. And then to the left is our new fitness area. Also, when you walk within this entrance, right across the hall is where our locker room area is. So we really were able to have that, so if we have athletic teams come to visit, they can enter the building in this area and be within a kind of, I don't want to say confined, but a space of the building that is meant for their activities without having to go through the whole building. All right, this is the new wrestling room area. It's a space that is capable of fitting 5 mats. This space will also be used for our middle school wrestlers very soon here, and also is used for Phi Ed instruction during the day and other athletic programs in the spring, as we actually will be able to have turf that goes down on 2 of the mats, so it can be used for many, many different purposes within that space. And then to the right, we refer to it as Gym D, which is the 4th, I guess, multi-purpose room or gymnasium or gym. Right now, as you can see, it's set up for our gymnastics. The purpose of this space was for our gymnastics to be able to set up and have everything remain up for their winter season in that. And this area is also, so the equipment is capable of being removed, and this space is also would be able to, you could set up tennis and have tennis courts, you could have basketball, you could have volleyball, and lots of different uses for this space. All right, this is down on the bottom is our new kitchen space. This will now allow for multiple students to enter at the same time. So before we would have a line that would, or 2 lines, and they would both go out and around the hallways. Now students can enter anywhere into this space, and there's going to be multiple areas they can go right up to receive whatever interests them for lunch that day. So that will really cut down on the wait time. And then also up above, you can kind of see, this is part of the remodel. There's an expansion here where the old Fine Arts Center was into the back, which will add vast amount of square footage to allow for much more seating for our students, because we were, back in the day, we're very concerned about students not having places to sit or having to wait in line, so they would bring their lunch. So now there will be many, many options for our students. Also in this area, they will have a new flexible learning space. There's a concession area dedicated just for concessions, so they won't need to be shared with the kitchen area. A new school store, and a serving window for their own maroon mug program at the high school. As we saw earlier in the presentation, with a district emphasis on belonging, inclusiveness, and equity, much thought went into the development of spaces of all students and staff so that they would feel comfortable. Above is one of our many single-user bathrooms. And also, you can see we now have changing tables for when we have community events to allow for convenience for families. And we have additional locker space, and a lot of it, and very large lockers. Individual showers for those that, in changing areas for our students, and multiple options. As you can see, there's also these other showers. So providing many options to fit the needs of any student. We also, within the project, there was a very large gain of instructional space in square footage. This is our new band room, which is at least double, I want to say close to, well, it's larger. I got to be careful. It's larger than the previous band room. And they have multiple space off of the band room for storage of their uniforms and equipment and practice rooms and so on. But then what that allowed was the choir moved into the old band room, so they gained some square footage. And then we were able to, in the old choir room, create a new science space, which was needed. So through having a new band room, we were able to meet the needs of our choir and of another addition of a science room. Also, our CTE programs gained quite a bit of new innovative instructional area in the building, and they were also able to, through additional grants and donations that they secured, they have a lot of very high-tech machinery there. So very excited for when we can have people tour these areas and for them to share all this new equipment with people. And then here's just a sneak peek of the new fitness area. which is about 3 times the capacity of the prior weight room. And then also a couple more pictures of our new Fine Arts Center. We hope to offer tours and have a great grand opening in the near future. But once the project does come to completion, which we're hoping here in the next couple weeks, that we can at least develop a virtual tour to start with. So that's the coming to conclusion with our referendum from 2018. Then we also had a referendum in April of 2019, and this was the one where the voters approved the $450,000 for the purpose of modernizing and maintaining a capable technology infrastructure and providing information technology services and devices across the district. As you can see, what has happened this past year is one-to-one device refresh in some of our Chromebooks and grade levels. Expansion of the one-to-one program to include elementary students. So this really could not have come at a better time with our need and increased need of technology. And we did some technology infrastructure upgrades and also professional development for both our teaching and technical staff. Okay, in the district, we have 5 focus areas, and we monitor these through our district dashboard. So our areas of focus are student learning, our fiscal, workforce, customer, stakeholder, and health and safety. We don't look at just one of these areas. We look at all 5 of these areas and monitor them closely with many measures to keep a healthy pulse on the district. So here's a picture of our 2020 dashboard. And it's also up on the wall in a large form over there in the room for those that don't have a copy in front of you. The district dashboard actually ensures that we measure what we treasure while monitoring the overall organizational health. It helps us to communicate our district story by showing areas of strength and opportunities for improvement. It holds us accountable to be effective, efficient while providing results. On this dashboard, and I'll be going through certain parts of it, I'll be showing you the overall picture comparing 2018-19 to 19-20. But please note, the caret, you'll see a caret. If there's a caret pointing up, it means improvement or improving over the past 3 years, a trend of it. If there's a caret down, that would mean we were diminishing over the past 3 years. If we have an equal signs, it means there was less than 5% change from the prior year. And then the colors, what do those colors represent? Well, the green means that we not only maybe met our district goal, but we outperformed both the state comparables and peer comparables, which I'll talk about in a minute. Yellow would mean that we outperformed either the peer or the state, but not both, or we met our goal of between 1% and 10% of our district goal. And then red would mean that we did not perform as well as the state or peer in comparables, or we were more than 10% from our district goal. So that kind of gives you a reference to what all those symbols mean. So here is a picture of our these are our peer districts in that. So we like to try and compare ourselves to districts more like us. So that's what we call our peer districts. So in the annual report, when you see peer districts, it is an overall average of all of these peer districts shown here on this map. Okay. So I'm just going to go through each of these areas as briefly as I can, but yet so you get a good picture of how we did this past year. So the first indicator, their graduation rate, we actually, this continues to improve, and we achieved our highest rate in recent history of 98.2% in 2019. So that's a great celebration. That's the highest rate we've had in many, many years. And then, as I mentioned, so you'll notice in 2019-20, there are 3 black equal signs. They are black because we don't have any comparable data this year due to they did not release data, state-level data for English language arts, math, or ACT. But you'll notice there was a caret going, we were improving, it was green, the ACT arrow caret was down last year because we had diminished a little bit in our score, but you'll notice it became an equal sign. So when we compare ourselves, we went up in achievement on the ACT from a 20.4 to a 20.7. That might not sound like much, but 0.3 on an ACT is quite a bit. So we really kudos to our students and the work and our staff on that. And lastly, I'm just going to mention here the student character survey. This is the student perception survey we give to our students grades 3 through 12. The trend shows that the students in the school district feel that the trend has been quite steady. But it's been steadily improving and most recently reaching our highest level at 82%. Our goal is to get that up to 90%. So it is improving over time, but it's not quite where we want it yet. So we will continue to work to improve that. All right, fiscal. I'm just going to talk briefly. So many of these lag by 1 year because we don't get the DPI data. So a lot of these will be lagging measurements or reflective of actually 2018-19. So that's why we'll see they are not black because we did have data for them because it always lags a year. So with that though, what I do want to mention is the one that's really important is the expenditure per student performance. And actually on page 13 in the annual report is a nice graph of that. And we have been, as compared to the state, we spend less, but we achieve higher compared to the state. And compared to our peers, we spend a little bit more, but we achieve higher in our performance. So this is one of the indicators we watch closely and we keep trying to improve at, because what we want to do is our goal is to eventually get to be a district that doesn't spend as much but achieves the highest. So that's what we're working towards. I'm not going to get into the details of these, but you can kind of see there were quite a few of improvements in these fiscal areas. The maintenance went from a diminishing red caret to an improving green. And also, you can see within transportation, they had great improvement. And Julie or Ms. Holmen will talk about some of these other measures in her presentation, because we have a lot of fiscal in her treasurer report also tonight. So I'll let her present on those. Then workforce. We did not receive data to redo our pupil to staff ratios as to why that is black. The DPI data has not come out. Our staff satisfaction is hovering around our goal of 90%. It was 92% the prior year. But our retention rate of educators actually had increased to 96.7%. We still are working on how do we measure the capability of our staff also. And that's something that I think could be a great discussion for our Personnel and Governance Committee to talk about, and other stakeholder groups. Okay, customer, stakeholder, and engagement. Ms. Holmen talked a little bit about our open enrollment. We were seeing diminishing trend over time. You can see it is now an equal sign. So we had less than 5% change from last year. So the gap is closing, but it still isn't closing at the rate we want it to. Our peers in the state have a better have better numbers than we do as a district. So we're going to continue to work on that. We're seeing small improvements over time, but we're going to keep working on that. And then we have here that our student satisfaction, the percentage of students satisfied is improving, but has not quite reached our 90%. And then our parent satisfaction has improved continuously over the past 3 years to reach 92.6%. So that's the overall. And then our last focus area, health and safety. Our workers' comp improved in the district, but yet we are still trying to improve enough to be better than our peers in that at this point in time. So this means we're better than the state, but not as better than our peers. And then the checklist, we're maintaining at 100%, so that is, we're just maintaining, we haven't changed. And then our student attendance rate has actually remained steady in the 90th percentile in that. And then these last two measures, they've improved, but they're black because the school year ended in March for this reporting because we weren't on site. So it improved, but we have to say it improved knowing that we weren't there for the whole school year. So as far as a comparison, it's not a direct comparison. So we have to be careful with what we're saying there. All right. So we know that school districts cannot do the important work of educating our youth without the support of many. And just in seeing the report tonight and all the referendums that the community supported and all the work that has been done in the past year, we could not have done that without their support. And also our support of our parents, employees, and volunteers that help us provide the services we do to our students is exceptional. So many commit their time and energy to help our students. I want to recognize and thank our school board members tonight and the Board of Education. The amount of time and dedication and commitment to providing our students a quality education while representing the constituents of our community is greatly appreciated. You are continually faced with making difficult decisions that impact the school district, but you also enjoy the opportunity to celebrate the many opportunities that you get to help provide and make possible for students also, as you could see through the many referendums and all the work that had been done in the past year. So thank you to everyone for your efforts. What you do makes a difference in the lives of our students. And with that, now I'm going to turn it over to Julie Holmen, and she is going to provide an overview of our enrollment and facilities report.
Dr. Mueller, can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry. Yes.
That's okay. So with the open enrollment, I know last year we talked about percentages, or do we know the percentages of those students who opt out who possibly live like?
Oh, she froze.
Here, can't remember if you guys had come up with that data.
Barb, you froze in the middle of your question. Could you re-ask it?
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so I just know last year we talked about how several of the families south of Sand Lake Elementary opt out because of where they live, you know?
So, yeah, we did do some research. I don't have exact percentages with me, but one thing we discovered as we started to dig into individual students is a lot of times the students never actually lived here. So what would happen is they lived in the Onalaska School District, and then the parents moved to Holmen, but kept their child in the Onalaska School District. So they never actually experienced Holmen, in other words. I remember the day I called Mr. Vogler and I said, who are these 6 kids? And he's like, I've never seen them in my building. And then that's what we discovered is that, so a lot of times, I think our borders are so close that we have families moving, but never actually, they want to keep the consistency for their child in the district, and they live close enough to provide that. So that's some of the research that we did this last year and discovered on that open enrollment. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Were there any other questions
Yeah.
until Julie gets set up? Okay, Julie.
Okay.
Okay, good evening. I am going to present now on enrollment and facilities. Some of this will be slightly repeated from the budget hearing, but a reminder that this is a separate meeting and a separate presentation for the annual meeting. So bear with me. So this presentation will include information on our actual 2021 enrollment, the, let's see, a little bigger, the 2021 year-on-year change, so comparing it to last year at this time, and the projected to actual differences. I will also look at the 2021-22 and beyond enrollment projections and talk briefly about facilities instructional capacity. This year's actual enrollment, as of the third Friday count, September 18th of 2020, is 3,861 students, grades early childhood through 12th. Remember, this count is a head count rather than a membership count. For example, for enrollment purposes, a student at 4K is counted at 1, but they are less than full-time, so the purposes of membership calculation, they're actually only a 0.6 for membership and a 0.5 for facilities occupancy because we have half-day 4K programs. This year's enrollment decreased by 1.35% or 53 less students. This compares to a decrease of 1.9% prior year and a 5-year average of minus 0.56%. This table builds on the prior table showing the year-on-year change for each grade level. You can see here that in addition to the 23 student decrease over prior year across grades, there was also how it figures out across grades. So if you look at the gray bars, minus 113 early child through 5th grade, 25 student increase at the middle school over prior year, and a 35 student increase at the high school. For example, you can also see the enrollment count at each grade level and how it changed. The red sticks out. Those are decreases over prior year. The black in that second to last column from the right are the increases in the grade level over prior year. And 14 student increase at kindergarten compared to last year is a 5.88% increase. There was a 33 student decrease at the 5th grade level compared to last year, or minus 10.38 decrease. We've had several decreases and increases at various grade levels, early childhood through 12. You might initially be surprised at the growth or decline in a grade level, but we're going to take a look at the cohort survival from one year to the next in the next slide. So the year-on-year change. If you take a look at the cells highlighted in yellow, these were last year's 285 6th graders migrating to 7th grade this year. So last year's 285 6th graders became this year's 285 7th graders. Basically 100% cohort survival. There might have been changes within that student population, but 285 have survived from 6th grade to 7th grade in that cohort. I know, they survived.
Yes, they have.
At the same time, last year's 318 5th graders, highlighted in blue, became this year's 319 6th graders, so they gained 1 within their cohort. Similarly, we anticipate migration of other classes to increase and decrease enrollment at various grade levels. So if you continue to track your eye from 2019-20 to the next row down, 2021, you can see that the actual grade survived again year on year pretty successfully. Where we're seeing the biggest impact is the early childhood, 4K for this year. A year ago, we expected to see a small increase of 28 students for 2021, so the 53 decrease of students was unexpected. So is COVID-19. The impact of the pandemic on enrollment is uncertain. We do know some families chose homeschool, other online options, non-CRVA. CRVA students in Holmen are counted as Holmen students. So some chose other online school options. I shared earlier that we had an increase in open enrollment out. Specifically, whether they were here last year or not, I cannot answer that tonight, but we did see an increase in open enrollment out, so that may also be impacting the minus 53 over prior year. So we continue to monitor these enrollment trends, and the projections are used for budgeting and facilities needs projections. This chart shows projected to actual. I just mentioned that we are anticipating about 28 additional students this year rather than 53 less. So a year ago at this time, we were projecting about 28 more. So this table shows the actual enrollments compared to the projections from prior year for 2021. So looking again at 6th grade as an example, you can see that 321 students had been projected at 6th grade, and the actual count September 18th was 319. We have 2 less students than projected in 6th grade, and so forth. In the middle school, the projection was 917 students. The actual count was 911, a variance of 6 students less than projected, or 0.65%. Across the district as a whole, the enrollment projection was 3,942, and the actual count is 3,861, for a difference of 81, a variance of minus 2.05%. So we did expect to see 28 students more, not 81 students less than expected. The greatest variance came in 4K, where we have 169 students rather than the 205 projected. This decrease is challenging due to the lack of cohort survival for 4K. So there isn't like this full 3K class coming into 4K like there is for other grade levels. The 4K and kindergarten numbers are important because the projections at the earliest grade levels do serve as our pipeline for enrollment in future years. Last year's 12th grade class was 277. This year it has been replaced with an incoming kindergarten class of 252. So that's a decrease of 25 students right there, just from graduating seniors to incoming kindergarten. So let's turn our attention to some projected years. That is the green header on the chart. The actual is orange, so 5 years of orange and then followed by 5 years of projected. We use the September enrollment numbers because the state mandates this enrollment count be used for multiple purposes and other calculations. So there's consistency across the number of membership that's being used in the calculations. Using this same also allows us to align enrollment projections with financial reporting and future facility needs. The bottom right-hand corner shows our projected average annual enrollment decline over the next 5 years of minus 0.73%. This is very close to our 5-year history of minus 0.56%. Note the annual decrease and increase varies as different sized groups of students enter and graduate out of the district. This chart removes the historical enrollment data so you can better see the projected enrollments. At the bottom, you can see the total enrollment change by number of students and percentage. In the gray shaded area, you see the projected totals for elementary, middle, and high school levels. A few notes about the projection process. Early childhood projection is identified using a prior 3-year average because there's no other reliable pattern of projection for early childhood special education. We typically use a prior 3-year average for 4K as well, as there's no other pattern for projection. For this year's forecast, 5 years of history has been used to help determine the average growth. This is done in order to adjust slightly upward to account for the sudden and presumably pandemic-related decline in 4K. K-12 projections are made using a cohort maturity and migration pattern. Migration is not the only variable used in the projection. We also look at new students arriving and existing students leaving the district. The study of enrollment in and out, along with student cohort trends, is critical to proper projections. We study past cohort details and grade level transfer history to establish trends that help us produce our best projections of student enrollment. Without such a study, it might be easy to overreact to a temporary space need with a large cohort of students moving through a building. The overreaction would be based on misperception that 1 or 2 large cohorts means continued future growth, or that short-term reductions means continued enrollment reduction. So as you've seen in the past, we definitely have some class sizes that are much larger than others, and we have to study the history and the projections to determine facility needs. Back in 2011, the district engaged in an extensive study to identify student capacity in our schools. The study results will require updating to accommodate the additional instructional spaces in the new high school addition and the new leased classroom spaces for the ACE Academy at the Holmen Area Boys and Girls Club. The additional square footage associated with increased instructional capacity is not being presented at this time. That work is still underway. When the projects are all done at the high school and we sit down and look at square footage of additional instructional space, we will bring that back to you at a future date, probably this meeting next year for instructional capacity. On the screen is the breakdown of student capacities at each elementary school, totaling 2,220 students. Having good enrollment projections is one half of developing a good facilities plan. The other component is identifying the student instructional space capacity. The numbers shown here represent the current calculated instructional space capacities at each instructional level. High school numbers based on the prior instructional capacity before the most current construction and addition at 1,288 students. These numbers account for facility square footage, board policy class size guidelines, special needs instruction, and space needs difference related to instructional programming. For example, the number of square feet needed for physical education or a science lab instruction is different from the space needed for a history classroom. This next slide shows a breakdown of our This year, I included 3 years of the enrollment projections long-term, going back 2 years, just to show you that 2 years ago, we were seeing 2 middle school years and 1 high school year where projected enrollment exceeded instructional capacity. I share that with you, just more of a history lesson in the projection of enrollment. It's formulated to turn pink when it exceeds the numbers within the facility capacity. The next one is last year's at this time enrollment projections where nothing was turning pink based on those projections. And then finally is the 2020 enrollment, and again, because of the decline, we do not anticipate facility needs in the near future. Anything be in the blue is out like 20 years, and that's good to take a look at, but it gets a little bit skewed when you go out that far. But either way, we do not anticipate a facility need as far as additional instructional capacity square footage in the future. So our current enrollment projections are being met by the current instructional capacity of our buildings. This is a larger version of the previous projection showing the current year and the projected 5 years. The second column shows the school capacity. Again, the high school will be updated to reflect the increased capacity in future presentations. The projection is formatted, and you can see that there is not any pink in the latest projections, which means our enrollment, our student estimates will fit into the spaces that we have, facility-wise. It's important that I disclose some limitations of the space needs analysis. Analysis to is specific to instructional spaces. Delivering effective instruction requires core facilities, circulation spaces, support facilities, as well as instructional space. Core facilities include cafeteria, gymnasium, offices, etc. Circulation spaces are entries, exit hallways, and support spaces are lockers, storage space, and receiving areas. Just a real quick recap of the high school improvements underway. A couple of years ago, it was identified that we were lacking in core facilities, circulation spaces, and support spaces. As a reminder, cafeteria too small, kitchen spaces couldn't accommodate, corridor space was an issue with passing time, and crowding in the hallways, and then the support spaces for locker room, storage, and gymnasium space was identified as inadequate, which prompted our 2018 referendum for the addition and the remodel. So how do we respond if projections are too low? For example, if the local job market changes, or there's any new jobs coming to town or high-paying jobs that are attractive to people to move to Holmen, we do have a long-range plan that prompts timely, cost-effective response. As shared previously in other presentations, the board's aware of the many-year build-out of a referendum. So if you have to add instructional space or facilities, it does take a few years of planning and passing referendum and then bonding for that project and building it out. With the approval of the 2018 referendum for the addition and some remodeling, we are currently in the process of meeting a bunch of these needs. Upon completion of the projects, the Facilities Committee and the Finance Committee may need to consider an update to the long-range site plans and the greater school building facility needs at other sites across the district. The long-range projections do not currently identify a need for any additional instructional space. Are there any questions?
Questions? No, I don't see any.
Okay.
And then moving into the treasurer's report. We'll let her take a drink.
All right, next up is the treasurer's report. So as required by state statute 12011, a report is to be presented at the annual meeting that states all receipts and expenditures of the school district since the last annual meeting, the current cash balance of the school district, the amount of a deficit or surplus, identify bills payable to the school district, identify the amount necessary to be raised by taxation for the support of the school district in the ensuing year, and identify the amount required to pay the interest and principal of any debt due during the ensuing year. Also provide a budget summary required under statute 65.90. Many of you in attendance were also at the budget hearing earlier this evening, and so some of those screens I may go through a little faster like we have in the past, and if there's any questions, please let me know. The first statutory obligation is to present the receipts and expenditures since the last annual meeting. This information can be found on the provided handout, the 2021 original budget. For those in attendance, this document is available at the back table, and you can find total revenue for each fund in the second column of the numbers. So what I presented earlier during the budget hearing was the 2021 budget, which was the final column of numbers, or the current fiscal year budget. What I'm presenting now in the treasurer's report is the completed 1920, listed as the 1920 unaudited on your budget summary. The board approved 2021 original budget document with today's date will be made available on the district website after this approval this evening. These numbers match the amounts in the auditor's draft financial statements. The total revenues of all funds represents the sum of revenue for each fund, less transfers made between funds. So the transfer made between funds in 1920 is the transfer from the general fund to the special education fund that occurs every year at the end of the fiscal year. The total revenues of all funds is $73,088,067. The reason that you see on line 77, which is referencing the budget summary document, we subtract the interfund transfer from both revenues and expense so that we are not counting it twice in the total revenues and total expenses. The next slide is the total expenditures for each fund. The total general fund expenditures are found on line 81 of the budget summary in the middle column of numbers at $48,443,950.08. It is under the unaudited 1920 numbers. As with this revenue, the sum of the individual fund totals is reduced by the interfund transfer on line 77 for the total expenditures of all funds of $87,037,990. The district's cash balance as of June 30th, 2020 is $25,725,464. You can see on this slide the cash balance amount for each of the separate funds. The operational general fund cash balance at $11.3 million. The special projects fund or gift account, Fund 21, at nearly $800,000. The debt service fund at $2.7 million. The capital projects fund for Fund 42, so the dollars remaining to pay for the construction, at $9.8 million. Food service cash fund at $700,000. Community service at $5,200. And then below the summary line are the two funds I mentioned earlier, Fund 64, Student Activity Fund, and Fund 72, the Scholarship Fund cash balances. Both of those are being transferred into the Special Projects Gift Fund beginning in 2020-21. This chart illustrates the district's actual and projected operational cash balance. On the far left, this chart starts with the cash balance as of June of 2019, and on the far right, it represents projected cash balance through December of 2020. The reason that we share this each year is so that you understand the cycle of when we receive revenue from state or local levy, and kind of the key points in the year where we have a high cash balance and then spend it down until we get receipts again from the state of Wisconsin or the local municipalities. So you see on this chart, the last arrow down is, and this is pretty typical, this is how this works, that we always have kind of lower cash balances in June and November based on those schedules, because the expenditures become pretty regular, not including the capital project that's going on, but pretty regular. Every 2 weeks, payroll and accounts payable and board bills becomes pretty regular, but the timing of our receipts is based in statute, and it's not very regular. So we always have some low points within the year where cash balance can get kind of low. The green line across the bottom of this chart is a $1 million identified target liquidity. So anytime we get close to that line, that is of concern, and we would potentially need to cash flow borrow to meet our expenses. We haven't had to do that externally for many, many years, but coming up tonight, we ask again for the permission to do it if we need to do it, so that we can meet those obligations throughout the year if we ever dip below and don't have enough cash on hand to meet those obligations. The cash balance is only one part of the district's fund balance amount. Fund balance provides a more complete picture of the district's financial position because it accounts for all financial assets and liabilities. The unaudited June 30th, 2020 general fund ending fund balance is $16,404,388. You'll find this information on page 1 of the 2021 original budget dated 10/26/20. See line 8 under the middle column of numbers. The fund balance amount is important in relation to annual expenditures. A small school district spending half of what Holmen does would expect to have a correspondingly smaller fund balance. A larger district, a larger fund balance. The general fund balance as a percentage of expenditures is 33.68 as of June 30th. Within the general fund balance are 4 designations, including restricted, committed, assigned, and unassigned. These include things like our sinking fund, the previously mentioned reserves for the Briggs McHugh Road project from the 2017 referendum, reserves for retiree severance, and for the construction project completions at Viking Elementary. The assigned, unassigned fund balance as a percentage of expenditures is 28.46% as of June 30th of 2020. This chart appears in the 2020 annual report booklet. The chart illustrates the June 30th fund balance trend over the last 5 years. As Dr. Mueller indicated, most of the financial report measures are 1 year in arrears, based on when all of the data is submitted to the State Department and available for comparison. So this chart goes through 2018-19, showing that fund balance in relation to expenditures and comparing it to the state average and our peer districts. The chart has been updated to show 29.82% at the end of 18-19. So previously stated, we are at 33.86% general fund balance, all of the different types included, which is higher than last year, and it was anticipated that it would be. So we had both a general fund surplus in our budget last year, plus underspend from the pandemic, which increased our fund balance over prior year. Fund balance provides a more complete picture of the district's financial position. These are the audited fund balances for the other funds. Special project fund, about $800,000. Debt service fund, $2.7 million. Capital projects fund, almost $8 million. Food service, $685,000. And community service is $5,200. So notice that those numbers are slightly different than the cash balances, because now we are fund balance and we include assets and liabilities, not just cash. A surplus occurs when revenues received during the budget year are greater than the expenditures. The opposite of a surplus is a deficit. The general fund surplus, we do have a general fund surplus to report for 2019-20. Please look at page 2, line 58 of the original budget document. Under the middle column of numbers, unaudited total revenues and other financing sources is $50,367,565. In line 81 is the total expenditures in the general fund of $48,443,950. The difference between these two amounts is $1.9 million and represents the unaudited 2019-20 general fund surplus. This surplus compares to the planned surplus of $1,023,000 for 19-20. The difference of $900,000 is a combination of receiving more local and interest revenue than expected and underspending due to the 3.5 months of school closure. The $900,000 difference represents 1.85% variance in budgeted expenditures. The 1920 surplus, while greater than budgeted, will positively impact the board's fiscal sustainability goal of achieving a fund balance of no less than 26.3% of expenditures. It also supports the unanticipated budget increase of $1.2 million, 1.4 if you include the CARES Act funding, but that's also on the revenue side. So $1.2 million in general fund expenditures associated with our response to COVID-19. The balance sheet in the auditor's report shows all funds, year-end total liability of $3,428,000. This includes accounts payables to vendors, accrued payroll liabilities, deposits payable, and unearned revenues. So this is $3.4 million as of June 30th. Next, I will talk about taxation, which we talked about earlier this evening. The recommended tax levy for the 2021 school year is recommended at $19,534,548 for all funds. This shall be set at $14,585,774 for the general fund, $4,868,774 for the Fund 39 debt service fund, referendum debt service fund, and $80,000 for Fund 80 community service fund. This represents a 0.44 decrease over the prior year. The proposed levy is not an increase to the tax rate. It is actually a decrease over prior year from $10.34 per 1,000 of fair market property value to $9.77 per 1,000, or a decrease of 57 cents. Item 9.2 later in the agenda will call for approval of the levy. The district's debt at the end of the 2019-20 budget year was $28 million, so June 30th, 2020. The district debt was $28,870,000. See line 173 of the budget summary document. By state law, the district's debt may not exceed 10% of the equalized value of the school district. The 2019 equalized value of the district was $1,897,908,385. So on the screen is a calculation of how you get to the margin of indebtedness allowable. So we take the equalized value of 2019. 10% is $189,790,000. Subtract our long-term debt that we have outstanding, add in basically our fund balance in debt 39, and we get to a margin of indebtedness of $163 million. This slide you saw earlier, it is the outstanding debt that we have in the voter-approved referendum debt in Fund 39. Green is the Series 2020, which was the refunded 2009B bonds, primarily the construction of Prairie View back in 2009. And then the maroon is the newer debt that we bonded for the high school addition and remodel, and that payment schedule goes out until 2030. The budget summary provided summarizes in DPI format the 2021 original budget. Detailed information compared to prior year was presented earlier this evening in the budget hearing. Are there any questions on the budget document? This is just a recap of the treasurer's report that was covered. And then I will move on into a few other items required in the treasurer's report. So this was also shared earlier, but the gross school tax rate, history, 5-year history for the School District of Holmen and the proposed tax levy certification. This gross school tax rate would reduce from $10.34 to $9.77 per fair market, $1,000 in fair market value. As Dr. Mueller mentioned, I'm sharing a few of our fiscal report measures that are in the annual report this evening, and this one is the comparative per pupil expenditure. Again, the data goes through 2018-19, so it was updated in March of this year once that information was available from our peer and state average districts. Holmen is in the maroon triangle, and in 18-19 or June 30th, 2019, our comparative per pupil expenditures were $13,907. This was 95% of the state average and 107% of the peer district average. The board has a comparative per pupil expenditure target to balance the needs of students with the limited resources the community has to fund educational opportunity. The target calls for comparative per pupil expenditures is to remain within plus or minus 5% of the state average. The rate continues to fall within the board-approved target area, just barely. I think it's at the bottom of the lower range. Next is our Moody's investment rating. This is the most recent year reported here is from 2019. A year ago, the School District of Holmen improved our level, actually it's a little more like 2 years now, improved our level of financial stability as measured by its Moody's rating of AA2. So when we bonded for the high school addition and remodel, we went through the regular Moody's call rating and were able to actually increase in 2018 our rating from the prior year, and that's actually, it's a good thing. It's really hard to do. It takes a lot of work, a lot of years to make that move upward, but that is a good sign of the fiscal stability of the district, and you can compare Moody's rating to your credit rating. When you go out to bond, it's applied for you get a better rate when you bond because you're on more solid ground financially and you're a good investment by those that are interested in investing in your bonds. On September 28th, the auditor presented the draft financial statements via Zoom to our Finance Committee Chair, Gary Dunlap was in attendance, as well as our Supervisor of Business Services, myself, and Dr. Mueller. At that time, the preliminary opinion is unmodified, and the draft management letter does include a comment on GASB statement number 87, and that is in regards to leases. They're just giving us a heads up that by the 2022 financial statements will include the reporting requirements around leases. So that is in the draft management letter. When the board sees that, that's what that's referring to. It does not refer to the currently, the audit that's currently being completed. It's just like a heads up for the future. An unmodified opinion is said to be unmodified when the statements give a true and fair view in accordance with the financial reporting framework. This is what we strive for, this is what we want, and this is what we have received for the 2019-20 draft financial statements. It is also considered a clean opinion, and it states, basically stating the auditor does not have any significant reservation in the respect of matters contained in the financial statements. These are pages from the draft financial statements for the 2019-2020 fiscal year. It demonstrates the issued unmodified report with no material weaknesses identified and no significant deficiencies identified. These pages are also from the draft financials in regards to state assistance or state awards. These pages represent the opinion regarding specifically the state awards. Again, no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies identified, and no findings to report in regards to the state awards. The state awards identified for this testing was special education and school-age parents, general transportation aid, and general equalization aid. Next is the federal awards. Again, no material weaknesses identified, no significant deficiencies identified, and no findings disclosed that required to be reported in accordance with uniform guidance. The child nutrition program cluster was identified and tested for the federal award, or what we call a single audit. So again, at the end of the draft financials, we can report that there are no financial findings or question costs in either the financial statement or the federal and state awards. I've mentioned several times tonight that we do not have the final financial statements, but I do like to share at this time that when they are available, the management discussion and analysis is written by Business Services, and it helps to summarize the 70 to 80 page financial statements. So I encourage you to read some of that if you want the short synopsis of the entire financial statement booklet. And that will also include the management letter from the auditor. This is just an example of the action in the agenda this evening for the board to accept the audit summary recommendation. So Cheryl, do you want me to go through the end of these and then you'll go back to the agenda for each of the actions?
Let's do the treasurer report approval of that first, and then as we come. So, before we move on, we would entertain a motion to approve the treasurer's report and audit summary as presented. Again, it's open to the electors.
So moved.
Barb, is there a second?
Second.
A motion's been made and seconded to approve the treasurer's report and audit summary as presented. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Then, under new business, board member salaries. Currently, our board members are paid $2,720 per year and $50 for each posted special meeting in addition to the bi-monthly schedule. Also, if eligible, board members are paid a $50 per diem for lost wages and other expenses due to attendance to items like conferences and events. So at this time, part of the annual meeting is to set the salaries for board members. So at this time, I would entertain a motion regarding the board salaries. And the motion, yes?
Yeah, do I have to say it in motion form, or can I ask a question?
Well, first, we should have a motion,
Okay.
and then a second to discuss, per
Then I
Robert's.
guess I make a motion to up it by the
Up it by the what, Barb?
equivalent 1.81% that the rest of the staff of the district got, just so that the district doesn't get behind, because it's been frozen for a while.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, Chris? Okay, Barb, did you have any further discussion?
Well, I just wanted to say that it was more just for the district not getting behind, because I know it's been frozen for a couple of years, and just that,
Sure.
does that make sense?
Yes. Any other discussion related to the motion regarding the board salaries? And I'm assuming you're just referring to the salaries, that the per diem will remain the same and the $50 per extra meeting will stay the same? Yes, so she is shaking her head, yes. I don't know if you can see her. Okay, so,
Yes.
thank you. Any other discussion? So a motion has been made and seconded to increase the board salaries by 1.87%. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Wasn't it 1.81?
Oh, I'm sorry. I wrote one.
Is that what the rest of the district got?
Yes.
Yes, 1.81. Thank you, Barb. So a motion's been made and seconded to increase the board salaries by 1.81%. And seconded, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. That's like the most uncomfortable thing we do all year, I tell you so. Then the next item is the recommendation of the tax levy. And I think, Julie, that was the screen you had up. So you did hear from Julie about the tax levy recommendations. And we do this as an annual meeting, and then as a board, we vote on it as part of our consent agenda. But the motion would be to approve a total 2020 school tax levy of $19,534,548. And so I would entertain a motion to approve that. You've seen that, I think, a couple times if you've been here, that that's the tax levy. Anyone want? Barb, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Rebecca, motion's been made and seconded to set a tax levy of $19,534,548 for 2020. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Then the next item is that authorization for short-term borrowing. As you saw from the one item that she shared, there are times when our cash balance becomes very low, and in order to be able to make expenses, we ask the community to approve for the district to borrow up to $1 million for the 2021 school year, and this would be short-term. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Brian, is there a second? Chris, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Then disposal of tangible personal property. And each year we have some property that we would like to dispense of. Some school boards have it where the board, if it's a certain value, the board has to approve it, and it can delay the disposal of that property. We have always had a motion at our annual meeting to allow for that. Julie, do you want to add to that?
Sure. We have Board Policy 690, school properties disposal. This is for like tangible property. Would not include things like land or buildings, but tangible property. And then the disposal policy identifies how administration would be authorized to dispose of it based on its value. And for example, things that have value would have to be equally shared out on a public auction website so that anybody would have access to that either through bid or first come, first serve, to just keep that on the up and out in the open, so any of those more valuable things would be distributed accordingly to any of the public. And then there's other language within the policy that also allows Dr. Mueller to dispose of property, for example, a donation to low income. There's history of doing maybe computers that are out of date being recycled or donated. So there's language in Policy 690 for events like that as well. But again, not for the land or
Right.
equipment disposal.
Right.
I
So
mean,
thank
land
you.
or building disposal.
Great.
Sorry.
So, yes, I would entertain a motion to authorize the school board to dispose of any tangible personal property that is determined by the school board to no longer be needed.
So moved.
Brian, is there a second? And Chris, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Then the last item this evening is the annual meeting date. So we have been meeting this week for the last several years, couple years, I know for sure. So to keep in sequence with that, I would entertain a motion to meet on October 25th, 2021 for our annual meeting and budget hearing next year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Gary and Rebecca, you seconding that?
Sure.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. And there is no other business to come before the meeting this evening, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Rebecca, is there a second?
Second.
Brian. Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn the annual meeting. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Okay, now, I know that we have some people coming up on the virtual. I'm going to let you
Not that one.
all switch that over.
Oh,
I'm going to visibly.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's.